Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Pop Culture with Maddie podcast. Sorry I'm late this week on recording a new episode, but I just didn't really feel like doing it yesterday. I was trying to finish season 2 of Heroes, so I had the full season to talk about, but I still haven't finished it because I ended up watching One Tree Hill all day instead. But here we are, nevertheless, to talk about the majority of the shows that I watched last week. We are going to talk about what I did watch of Heroes because we're going to talk about it again next week, so I don't see the point in not doing so. So let's get started in our chats about what I watched last week. The first thing we're going to talk about is Why Women Kill. Now, I did have to finish season 1, but I already did a TikTok video on my TikTok at PopCultureQueen99 telling you guys what happened at the end of season 1. So we're just going to start straight in with season 2. Now, season 2 is a whole new story with a whole new cast of people. We meet Alma. Alma is this woman who is not really popular in the town. She's very much like overlooked, not looked at. She strives to be the most well known, the most popular, the prettiest person in the town, and she will do anything to get there. Her goal is to get into this gardening club because she really loves gardening. And she's, of course, rejected by anyone who is a part of this club because she's not pretty enough. She soon finds out that her husband is actually a murderer, and he keeps their like a personal item from them as a trophy of their death. And so she gets, of course, very upset because, well, that's crazy. And then, as they're having this conversation, their neighbor is listening in, and she closes the window, and the neighbor falls off right on the shears, like the scissors she had on the ground, and the neighbor dies, Mrs. Yost. So Mrs. Yost is now dead, and they have to cover up the body because even though they could have just called the cops and say she's listening in and she fell and whatever, they'd have to talk about why she was so intent on listening, and they thought it'd be better to cover it up instead of just coming clean about what happened because it was a mistake. It wasn't supposed to happen. They didn't kill her. So they bury her in the yard, and then they realize that she has a dog, and they decide to take the dog. They also decide that they have to make it look like she disappeared, so they take her car. One of them's in her car, one of them's in their car, and they drive the car off into a lake. And they push the car into a lake. And that seems so funny because Alma leaves her purse in the car. But Alma's wearing Mrs. Yost's clothes, and Mrs. Yost has very nice stuff and very nice clothes, and so they also start stealing from her and borrowing her stuff because she's not home, and they're like watching the dog. Um, and so they don't think anything about this could be wrong. They could return all this stuff after the first garden club meeting because she finally does somehow get into this garden club, but they do not. And then the nephew comes home for the neighbor, and the daughter's talking to him and finds out that all the stuff's been stolen, so she tries to return it, and she starts to look bad, and it's crazy. Anyway, on top of all of this, though, the woman she so desperately wants to be, Alma, is Rita. Rita is married to this much older man. She's having an affair with a younger one who her Alma's daughter happened to also be going out with. And it's just a very crazy, complicated thing. So the old man falls down the stairs and he gets really hurt at one point in the movie while his wife Rita is sleeping with the younger boy. And then he's very like sick. He's incapable of uh like talking and moving, and he's getting some memory loss, and he's slowly like but surely regaining his strength back. So Alma decides to take matters into her hands and has her husband kill him. And this is the beginning of the end for Alma, if you ask me. The show just gets crazier and crazier and crazier. And while he's doing that, she has an extra syringe of the stuff and she plants it in Rita's purse so that Rita goes to jail for the death of her husband because not only does she want to get off scot free, but she knows that spot in the garden club will be open because she wasn't in the garden club before. She was just getting like a little surprise home visit to see if she's good enough to join the garden club. But now the spot's open, they have a new role for a president, and the town is going a little crazy. Now, there's two people who are running for this president, Alma and this other woman, and Alma decides to find out the other woman's secret to keep her from running, to get her the spot, to get her the winning spot, and of course she does. Typical. And um, as the show progresses, though, the boy who Rita is sleeping with, well, that's a complicated story. So Rita hires a PI to investigate him because she thinks that he might be sleeping with someone else, and turns out he was. He Alma's daughter, and so Alma's daughter comes and embarrasses Rita at dinner when they're together one night because, well, she's like, I'm not gonna go out with you anymore if you're going out with her, because she also hired the guy to find out what he was doing, and it turned out he was with her. So that's a whole crazy story. But then, as that story progresses, she starts to fall for the PI, and then she finds out she's pregnant, and she knows it's the other guy's baby. And so they get married at the courthouse in secret. They don't tell anyone. They don't even tell their parents at first. And then, as after they have dinner or whatever, he's very suspicious of Dee's family, obviously, because they're acting very weird because they have done things and they don't know how to say. They have to try to find cover-ups, and they're trying to find cover-ups in their story. So he doesn't believe that they're innocent of any of this. So he breaks into their house one night, and he ends up being greeted, of course, by Alma, and they have a little conversation, and the husband gets mad at him for doing that and for talking to her without him, and he's decided to go confess to him everything that happened, because it's supposed to be he planned to kill him, but he doesn't do that. He just goes to confess. And he's like, I did it, I confessed, the cops are on their way. And so they wait for Alma to get home before he calls the cops. He waits a little while to call the cops so that he could say goodbye. And Alma's like, no, that's not okay. And so they decide they're both going to go out in their own way. They're going to do it to kill themselves. And then he does it, and she does it, and she takes his glasses and puts a little note and does it just like he did with all his little trinkets he saved from his previous murders, where she is now doing just like he did, and she becomes the most popular person in the town. Now, I did forget to mention this part, but Alma also kills Rita, and that's how she ends up being convicted of murder, is because she was so enraged in that moment when she did it that she didn't even think about the consequences of her actions. She didn't try to cover it up. She didn't have any plan whatsoever. It just happened. And so she's got blood all over her boa, and so she runs home, and that's when she runs into the scene of her husband saying, like, oh, I've confessed. And so after she's in jail, we find out about everybody else. They found Mrs. Yost's body because I guess she came clean, or because the husband came clean, whatever. Oh, sorry, excuse me. Um, Dee, her daughter, had the baby, and her husband are having a great life. Scooter went on to be a big star in something, I think, and everybody lived happily ever after that was still alive. That was really great. And that was the craziest season of a show I think I've ever seen. 10 episodes, and it managed to be so full of so much, like, craziness. The first season was good, but I don't know, the second season I kind of liked better because even though, yeah, like it had the murders in it more and it was more about murdering and dying and killing and stuff, I just thought the storyline was so much more fascinating. Like, there's so much to keep up with in the first season because it was three different storylines, whereas this one, it was all in this one, and it was just multiple different people within it, and it felt just like a TV show. I wish it was a longer season. That's the thing I hate about new streaming TV shows, is that they're like short episodes, short seasons, whatever. But the show came out years ago, so they can't change the past. But I am mad that they canceled it and they didn't keep going because the show was really good. It's really interesting to find out the different reasons why women would be intrigued into killing. And Alma had all the motives in the world to get the life that she wanted. It doesn't mean she should do it, but she definitely had the motive. I think that's what this show is about, is what's the motive of these situations. So let's go on to the next show. So I only watched one movie this week, so the rest were all shows. So the other shows I watched were Echo and Heroes, of course, as I stated at the beginning of this video, and I watched the movie When in Rome. Now let's talk about Echo, talk about When in Rome, and then we'll talk about Heroes. So, Echo. Echo is the new Marvel Studios show. It's the first one of the year, and it is, of course, about Maya Lopez. Now, we were introduced to Maya Lopez in Hawkeye, and she is a deaf hero, if you will, with a amputee leg. Now, she is introduced to be a part of Kingpin's like group of people. And we don't really get a ton of backstory for her character in Hawkeye because the show isn't about her, but we do get her in Hawkeye. And she goes on her kind of own journey in that show, finding out that Wilson Fisk, Kingpin, if you will, is not a good guy. So this show is really like kind of what happens after that. So what I loved about this show, this is your spoiler warning, by the way, is immediately we get a whole episode pretty much about like her whole life. We get a whole history of her character, and we find out that she lost her mom when she was really young. We find out why she's an amputee, how she lost her leg. She's been deaf her whole life. Her mom, I think, was deaf too, if I'm not mistaken. And so she's known ASL like her entire life, and she's been doing it her whole life. So she's already at a point where she's like, she's got a disability. She's got something that kind of holds her back, but she doesn't let it hold her back. And I think that's really cool. I think this show also did a better job of representing the ASL language compared to Hawkeye. They just, she's doing a lot of reading lips, and this time there's a lot of people there to help her understand like what's going on. And I think that's really cool. And there's a lot of great scenes in the show. Now, one of the flashbacks we got was there's most of the scenes we saw in Hawkeye, but some of them we didn't. Well, a good bit of the scenes, sorry. There's a scene with Daredevil, and everybody got really excited because they saw Daredevil in like a clip of this, and they were like, "Oh, Daredevil's going to be in the show." Now, this is the only scene Daredevil's in the show. I actually have a reaction posted, but it's kind of splotchy because I need the full clip, and so I'm hoping that there's a full clip now that I can add the full reaction to. Um, but Daredevil shows up in the scene and he fights Fisk, and then Maya goes back to, and he fights Maya. I mean, Daredevil fights Maya, and then Maya goes back to Fisk, and he's like, "You've done better against him than anybody else ever has." Like that was a brilliant fight. Nobody's ever been able to hold up their own against him. And I think that's really cool to note. And I think it's definitely interesting because we're definitely getting more Daredevil since we're getting the Daredevil Born Again show with Fisk and Daredevil in it. So it makes me wonder if she's going to be part of that story or if she's finally going to be away from Fisk and how this story is going to go because of the way that this season went. So after we catch up to Maya's life in the present, she goes back to her hometown where she grew up. And she's trying to take over as queen, essentially. She wants to be the new person in charge, but she soon after realizes that Fisk is still alive and she didn't actually succeed in killing him like she thought she did. He tries to get her this gift, which is a contact lens, so she can see sign language to what he says, and he can hear what she's signing to him. So they have a bit more privacy in their conversation, and they don't always have to have a translator because that's always a problem between them. And then, of course, she calls him out because she's like, "You never even tried to learn sign language." And that's really big of her. And I'm really happy she did that because her whole family still knows it like 20 years later. Like, we see that throughout this show. But he doesn't. But within the show, there's some great action scenes, like the one where she does something with the train. I think she blows up the train. She blows up the train, and that's like a crazy scene. But there's so many crazy scenes. But in that, her hands start to do this glowing thing. And this whole show ends up tying into these Choctaw warriors. And it turns out that she isn't like those are her ancestors. Like she's a descendant of these Choctaw warriors. and the spirit comes into life, and she ends up using her power, her spirit in her, whatever, um, to take down Fisk. And he survives, of course, because it's not really like a big takedown, but she manages to get it and get him. And I think it's really cool. There's lots of great scenes in the show. You should definitely go watch it. I'm not gonna sit here and talk about it all day, but I think it's a great show. You do have to watch it, like to watch it because of the sign language, but I think it's still really beautiful and it's still really eye catching. Like you won't want to look away most of the time. It's very fascinating to watch. It's not ever really boring, which I think is really great. The show's also only 5 episodes, so you could watch it in like one sitting. So if you haven't watched it yet, you should definitely go check it out. All right, When in Rome is a movie I watched. It's the only movie I watched this week because I was just so busy trying to watch these shows. Um, because I do other things than just sit here and watch shows. Like there was a day I think I just read. I didn't even watch anything. Um, my God, excuse me. So this is like a really cute movie. It's a rom-com, of course. Now, Kristen Bell is this character who's basically like married to her job, and she doesn't really believe in love. And she has to go to her sister's wedding, and her sister's probably been engaged for like a few months or something. Like it's not been a very long time. Like they barely know each other. And she's trying to like talk about like you barely know him. Like this isn't like if you'd known him for a while, whatever, be great. But like you don't really know him. I just don't think that this. She's like it's true love. Okay, I promise. Um, and so she goes out, runs out at some point in the movie, and she kind of ends up liking the best man. And then she sees him kissing this other woman, and she gets upset, and she runs off, and she goes to this fountain, and she decides to pick up all these coins in the fountain. And for each coin she picks up, it's tied to a certain person, the person who threw it in. These people become like her suitors, and they want her. And so she has this whole movie happen where this whole movie basically happens based off the fact that um, all these people she picked up all these people's coins in the fountain, and they belong to these people, and they're attracted to her, and they want to be with her. And she's like, "This isn't real. Like this is weird, whatever." And so she eventually finds a coin that's like a poker chip, just like the one that Josh Duhamel's character has, which is the best man. And she's like, "Oh well, I thought that he was in love with me, but turns out it was real." And so she finds out she has to give the coins back to the people who she got them from. And that's how she can break the spell. And so she goes to give back the coins, and she does it to Josh Duhamel's character too. And nothing really happens. It's like, okay, because it wasn't his coin. And so they end up deciding, I guess, within so much time or whatever later, to get married. And on their wedding day, the dude who had all the coins, the magic trick dude, whatever, ends up giving her a different coin, and she's like, and they're all like, "Oh my God, so it was the wrong coin. So she really isn't in love with me. It's always been this coin." And so she gives him the coin, and it doesn't do anything again. She's like, "Oh." But she waits until like late, like they're at the altar, and she's like, "I can't do it." And she runs away, and he runs after her, and she tries to give him back the coin. He's like, "That's I don't know why you keep giving me my coins." And it's so funny. But then it turns out it was the priest won all the coins in the poker game, and it was him who threw the coin into the fountain, and it was him the whole time. And so Josh Duhamel's character really was in love with her, and I just think that's really, really sweet, a really sweet ending. And this is, I think, either the movie that they met while filming, Dax Shepard and Kristen Bell, or they were like already engaged or something by this point. I don't really know, but I think that's really cute. But he does not look cute in this movie. So that's really fun. So anyway, let's move on to Heroes. So I am on season 2 of Heroes. I already watched season 1. Season 1 was phenomenal, but just a quick little recap of season 1. We meet all these heroes all around the world who end up coming together to stop a bomb in New York City. The bomb is Peter Petrelli. Peter Petrelli is, of course, presumed to be dead in this storyline. We also got other great heroes that I'll talk about in a minute. So Nathan flies Peter up to into the sky so that Peter can blow up out of the way of everybody, and it saves the city from being blown to bits. because he can't control the bomb. Um, he's the bomb, by the way. Uh, these characters have powers. If you're not aware of what the show is, and so he's the bomb. He's about to blow up. His brother flies him up, and everything's okay. And they all think that he died. And Nathan, I guess, throws him up further and lets go of him or whatever, and he goes back down and he survives. And we don't see Peter, so we don't know what happened to Peter. Now I'm at the point in season 2 where we're actually catching up to what happened to Peter. So I don't fully know what happened over those 4 months, but season 1 jumps 4 months later. Now, other heroes, we have our Hiro. Hiro is a Japanese like worker guy who can. They all have different powers, so he can like um time travel and he can like move through time and all kinds of stuff. He's basically like a time. His power is like time, whatever. So that's really cool. Peter's ability, by the way, is to mimic other people's powers. And that's a huge difference from a different character I'm gonna talk about. Now we meet these new characters, um, Alejandro and Maya, and they are like Mexican. They're in Mexico, and she has this power where she can like her eyes turn black, and they black comes down from her eyes, and she like kills all the people around her. And that's a crazy power. Like she's basically like a killer, if you will. Claire Bennett is one of the main characters, played by Hayden Panettiere. I love her. And her power is cellular regeneration. She can literally like cut off her toe and it grows back. She can fall from a big height and survive. Like she's indestructible, essentially. Um, Nathan is flying. What else? Matt Parkman is a cop who can read minds, and he adopted this girl at the end of the previous season, and because she was like being used by this bad company to locate people and things and whatever, and so he's like, I'll take her in, whatever, because he wanted a kid, and his wife was pregnant, but it was another man's baby, and so he left her, and so he gets this opportunity to have a kid, and he decides to rate, and he's raising it with Dr. Suresh, who's this doctor who's trying to find a way to help all these people with these powers. He does not have any powers. Um, Sylar was the villain of the previous season. I don't know what his motive is this season, but he has the ability to like steal other people's powers and move things with his mind and all kinds of stuff. Like he basically like cuts their like by their brain and like they bleed out and he can get their powers, but he's currently like powerless, and so I don't know where we're going with that. Kristen Bell plays this character who has this like electro power or whatever, where she can kind of like do stuff with electric currents or whatever, like shocks and stuff, lightning bolts, whatever, if you will. Um, Micah can like do stuff with like technology. He can hold his hand up and he can like make the TV turn on and whatever, do all kinds of stuff there. Um, he can like repower things that don't work and make them work and stuff. And he lives with his family now in New Orleans because his mom decided to go try to get a cure because they promised that they could cure her of her ability because she is like a multi-personality thing, like when they can take over. And one of them, Jessica, like we got her a lot last season, she's like a fighter and dangerous and evil and a killer, and her name is Nikki, and she's, her whole that whole family has powers. And so it's her like cousin, I guess. I don't really remember her name, but she has the power to mimic other people, not their powers, just anything they do. Like if she sees somebody jump roping, she can do it. If she sees somebody doing acrobatics, she can do it. Like she can do anything she sees somebody do. Like she can just mimic their um yeah. And so these people all have these cool powers, and I don't know how this is going to connect in the end and how this is all important, but I guess somehow it is. There's this character last season named Isaac Mendez, and he could paint the future, and he was killed by Sylar. But before he died, he painted this series of 8 paintings that I think are present to the storyline, where they all end in a certain ending that the painting has. And so we found all these paintings. I can't remember all of them, but Claire's adopted dad is like dead in one of them. And there's like all these different things that happen over the course of these paintings that I guess we're trying to stop or whatever. I don't really know what the plan is with this. I don't understand the semantics because the show doesn't really explain things to me because it has so many people to talk about. But let's get into the storylines this season. So Maya and Alejandro were caught in a big murder, essentially. So she's at his wedding and her power comes to, and she ends up, after catching his new bride and best man together, she ends up accidentally killing them and everyone else at the wedding, and her brother's the only one alive. And so then they're on the run and they're trying to get to the United States. When they're on their way to the United States, they find Sylar, and they don't know that this is like the bad guy, whatever. He's like, I can take you to Dr. Suresh because he knows Dr. Suresh, of course, from the previous season. And I think he's trying for his own ulterior motive. He even says it at one point in English to Alejandro about what his plan is to kill them and whatever, but Alejandro doesn't understand English, so he doesn't hear or really know anything he just said. Maya's the only one that can understand English, so he's primarily talking to her. Um, Claire had to move to a new place to live because they all knew about her powers. A lot of people were finding out about her powers. Her family knew about her powers. So, to keep her protected, to keep her safe, her dad decided that she had to move, which I think makes no sense, but whatever. And so they moved to this new town in California, and she decides to go out for cheerleading team. And she meets this boy who can fly. And her dad's like against the dating thing, which weird, but whatever. And he finds out that she's dating, and he's like, and then eventually he kind of finds out that people are knowing, maybe know about her powers because she did this prank to get this girl Debbie off her back and get on the cheerleading team. And so Debbie's like, I saw this flying man and this girl fall from for her death, and she like and that was Claire, of course, and the guy whose name is Wes. And he has this whole thing, this story where keeps talking about this man with horn-rimmed glasses who turns out to be her dad, and she keeps trying to tell him that. And so then when he sees him for the first time, he's like, "That's him! He's found us!" Like he freaks out, and he has this like mark on his neck from it. And so there's something that her dad did in a previous life or a previous time where he tortured people, I guess, or whatever, like he did Wes. And so that's something I'm curious to learn more about. And so I definitely appreciate the fact that Claire doesn't trust her father as much as he doesn't trust her, because I feel like there's a very good reason not to trust him. He's not done like the best things. I understand he's doing it to protect her, but he's still not making the best choices. And he's her adopted dad, by the way, because her biological father is Nathan Petrelli, the one who can fly. So it makes Peter her uncle, despite how much chemistry they have, their uncle and niece. And I don't like that, but whatever. So that's that story. So when we meet Peter Petrelli at the beginning of the season, he has no memory of anything of who he is or whatever. Peter, I said Peter, right? When we meet Peter this season, they find him in a shipping container. These guys in like Ireland, and there was supposed to be something in the shipping container like that was supposed to help him get some money or something, but it wasn't there, and so that he was they beat him up at first, and they're trying to get the guy paid or get things to the guy so they can get paid or whatever. I don't remember exactly the semantics. And so eventually they get all this, they steal something else and they get it all paid, and he helps them out because he has these powers. So they all know about these powers. And then Kristen Bell's character comes looking for him, and he's already gone. He's gone. He's painted, he's used one of his ability to mimic other people. He can do the painting thing like Isaac Mendez, and he ends up making this painting, and decides to go where this painting is at, like in Montreal or whatever, to find out like what happened. And he ends up like in the future and trying to figure that out. And so now we're in this episode where it's like 4 months earlier, after he blew up New York, finding out what happened to Peter. And so Peter survived, of course, and they just didn't tell anybody he survived because I guess they decided to do something. They tell him they're capable of curing his powers. They've decided to reestablish the company and trying to find a cure for the powers. And so he's like thinking taking these pills every day and whatever is going to cure him. Um, so he decides to do it, but his like the guy that's all over, his name is Adam, tells them like I've been here for like 30 years, dude. They're not even anywhere close to finding a cure. Like they're not gonna cure you. This isn't like a facility, this is a prison. And that's about where I left off with that. Um Nathan is very distraught in his life. He managed to, of course, survive despite kind of almost being blown up by his brother. He had a very scarred face, but they managed to fix it. He grew his beard. He was very depressed, very upset. He's getting a divorce from his wife. He's in a very terrible place because he thinks his brother is dead. And so he decides to go with Matt Parkman on this mission, and they eventually tell him that his brother is still alive. And so he kind of is starting to come back to himself again. And there's a point where Claire calls him for help because he's the only one she can talk to, I guess, because he understands the power thing, but he's like, I'm not the one to talk to. Blah blah blah. Um, Hero ends up time traveling to Japan, and he meets one of his heroes who turns out to not really be a good person, and he ends up basically being his favorite hero in all these stories. And so at the end, the girl who was supposed to be the lover of this guy is like, as long as I shall live, I shall tell the story of. I forgot his name. It's some Japanese thing. I can't remember. Like most of the stories in Japanese because it's 1607 Japan, whatever. And I will tell the story of him, and then he travels back in time to the present day, and he ends up finding his friend, who was there the whole time, and he's like, I have to tell my dad, and then that's when he finds out his dad was murdered by somebody who's that was the first painting in the series of 8 is his father's death. And so, and there's this symbol that's drawn over their faces in these pictures, and they're all like being attacked, all these people in this big picture. So, like, Peter and Nathan's mom was next, and she almost dies. And then the next one, like, is supposed to be Bob. They're after Bob next. Bob is the guy who's doing this company, like, finding a cure and whatever. There's all these different things going on. There's, like, way too much going on. And this is now a really long podcast because I've been talking forever, but it's okay. So yeah, Heroes is really crazy. I can't wait to find out more, find out what happens next, and talk to you guys about it. So I might just talk to you guys about season 2 when I finish it on my TikTok at Pop Culture Queen 99 because I think I only have a few episodes because the season is only 11 episodes. But if this season continues on to the next season because it did get abruptly ended, it probably will. I'll have to wait, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Um, yeah, I'm trying to finish Heroes. I was gonna just watch The Simpsons, but I decided to watch Heroes instead. So here we are. I did not read a whole book this week, so I will not be talking about a book, but I read most of the third book in the series, A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. If you guys want to stay up to date on my Good Girl's Guide to Murder series reading or any of my other readings, you can follow me on Goodreads. It's linked in my Instagram bio at Maddie_Ladner5299, but I will try to link it here on Spotify for you guys as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this episode and keep listening for more pop culture updates of what I've been watching. And I hope that you guys follow along for more. I could talk about One Tree Hill, but that wasn't really a thing that was me watching. My mom was watching it. So anyway, yeah, that's all. And I'll see you guys next week.